Family is supposed to be the place where you feel safe, loved, and respected. But sometimes, the very people who share your blood can be the ones who hurt you the most. When my own sister looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You don't even have a family," it felt like someone had ripped the floor out from under me. Those words didn't just sting, they cut deep into my heart, leaving me questioning my worth, my relationships, and even my memories. It wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to erase everything I had built, everything I stood for. And the worst part, behind my back, while I was still processing the cruelty of her words, she was making plans to move into my house as if she owned it. No permission, no conversation, just greed disguised as entitlement. This wasn't about love or family. This was about control, jealousy, and a hunger for what wasn't hers. I had worked hard for every brick, every corner, every room of my house. It wasn't handed to me. It was earned through long nights, sacrifices, and struggles she never saw. And yet, she wanted to slip into my life like a thief in the night, pretending she had a right to something she never helped build. What do you do when the person who's supposed to stand beside you is the same person trying to push you down? What do you do when family becomes the enemy wearing a familiar face? This is the story of how I faced betrayal in my own bloodline, how I stood up against the lies, and how I finally discovered that family isn't always about who shares your name. It's about who truly respects your heart. There are some moments in life that etch themselves so deeply into your memory that no matter how much time passes, you can recall every detail. The tone of voice, the look in someone's eyes, even the weight in the room as the words are spoken. For me, one such moment came on a quiet Sunday afternoon when my sister, the person I had once trusted more than anyone else in the world, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You don't even have a family." Those 7 words, sharp as broken glass, cut me deeper than any wound I had ever endured. It wasn't just the cruelty of the sentence that stunned me. It was the absolute certainty in her voice, as if she was announcing a truth that had always been there, waiting for me to hear. I remember the silence that followed, so thick it seemed to press down on my chest. My heart stumbled in its rhythm, caught between disbelief and hurt. I tried to laugh it off, to pretend that she hadn't meant it the way it sounded, but the corners of her mouth never softened. Her eyes held no warmth, only a chilling satisfaction, as if she wanted to see the pain spread across my face. And it did. I could feel my stomach twist, my throat tighten, and suddenly the room that once felt safe now seemed hostile, like I was standing in enemy territory. I wanted to ask her why. Why would she say something like that? But the words wouldn't come out. The strange thing about pain is that it doesn't always explode in the moment. It seeps in slowly, filling every crack of your mind long after the moment has passed. That night, I lay in bed replaying her words again and again, each repetition stabbing deeper than the last. "You don't even have a family." Did she mean that I was unloved? Did she mean that I was alone, that the house I had built, the life I had created, counted for nothing? Or did she simply want to hurt me because hurting me made her feel powerful? The questions circled endlessly in my mind, keeping me awake long past midnight. The truth is, I had always thought of my sister as complicated. Growing up, she had been quick-tempered, unpredictable, sometimes cruel, but I convinced myself that's just how siblings were. I told myself that underneath her sharpness was love, even if she didn't always know how to show it. There were times when she defended me at school, when she made me laugh until my stomach hurt, when she cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. Those moments gave me hope that our bond was stronger than her flaws. But now, as her words echoed through me, I started to question everything. Maybe I had been blind. Maybe I had seen what I wanted to see instead of what was real. Over the next few days, she acted as though nothing had happened. She called me casually, texted me about meaningless things, even asked me if I could lend her some money until payday. Not once did she apologize or even acknowledge what she had said. It was as if, in her world, those words carried no weight at all. But in mine, they were a storm I couldn't escape. Every time my phone lit up with her name, I felt my chest tighten. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to hear her voice. Yet, a part of me still clung to the hope that maybe she would explain herself, maybe she would take it back. That hope was foolish, but I wasn't ready to let it go. The breaking point came when a neighbor stopped me on my way home from work. "I saw your sister around the other day," Mrs. Patel said with a smile, as if she were delivering good news. "It's so nice that she's visiting you so often. Family is everything, isn't it?" I nodded weakly, but inside my stomach churned. Visiting me. I hadn't seen her in days. When I asked for details, Mrs. Patel explained that she had spotted my sister unlocking my front gate, carrying bags inside, and even sitting on my porch drinking tea like she lived there. I forced a smile and thanked her, but by the time I reached my door, my hands were shaking. The sight that greeted me when I stepped inside made my heart plummet. There in the hallway were boxes. Not mine. Hers. Clothes spilling out, shoes lined against the wall, even a framed picture of her propped carelessly on the table. I rushed through the house in disbelief, and everywhere I looked, her belongings were scattered. Drawers stuffed with her things, toiletries in my bathroom, food she had bought sitting on the kitchen counter. It was as if my home had been invaded, claimed without a single word to me. When she finally walked in, carrying yet another bag, she looked at me like I was the intruder. "Oh, you're home early," she said casually, brushing past me as though this was her space, not mine. My voice trembled as I asked her what she was doing, why her things were here, why she thought she could just move into my house without asking. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She simply shrugged and said, "I need this place more than you do. You'll be fine." Her words slammed into me harder than before. Fine. Did she think my home, the place I had worked tirelessly to build, meant nothing to me? Did she believe she had the right to take it because she wanted it? I stood there, shaking, struggling to process the audacity. She looked me in the eye again, and this time I saw it clearly. The same cold satisfaction she had shown when she said I didn't have a family. This wasn't about need. This was about power. She wanted to take something from me simply because she could. I wish I could say I immediately told her to leave, that I stood tall and refused to be treated that way. But the truth is I froze. Part of me was furious, part of me was heartbroken, and part of me was still that younger sibling who believed family deserved endless chances. My voice came out weak, asking her to talk about it, to at least explain. But she brushed me off, unpacking her bag, humming to herself like she had one. That night, I sat in my own bedroom, surrounded by walls I had paid for, yet I felt like a stranger. The house no longer felt like mine. Sleep refused to come. My mind raced with memories, her laughter when we were children, her arms around me during hard times, and now the cruel words, the invasion, the betrayal. I couldn't understand how we had come to this point. How could the same sister who once promised we would always stand together now treat me like nothing more than an obstacle in her way? I stared at the ceiling until dawn, knowing in my heart that everything had changed. The next morning, when the sunlight streamed through my window, I made myself a promise. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I would not let her take from me what I had worked for. I would not allow her cruelty to define my worth. She might think I had no family, but maybe that was the point. Maybe family wasn't about who shared your blood. It was about who respected you, who valued you, who stood beside you without trying to break you. And if she couldn't do that, then maybe she wasn't my family after all. The morning after discovering my sister had practically moved into my house without asking, I walked into the kitchen hoping for some clarity, but instead I found her at the table, sipping coffee as if she had always belonged there. She was scrolling through her phone, legs crossed, wearing one of my old t-shirts like it was hers. The smell of toast filled the air, and for a fleeting moment, it almost looked like a normal scene, a sibling visiting, making herself comfortable. But my stomach tightened with anger when I saw she had left the cupboard doors open, my favorite mug sitting dirty in the sink, crumbs scattered across the counter. My house had always been my sanctuary, clean and orderly, a place where I could breathe. Now it felt invaded, tainted by her careless presence. "Good morning," she said casually without looking up, as if this was the most natural arrangement in the world. "I made enough coffee for both of us." I stood frozen, gripping the doorway, unsure if I should shout, cry, or just laugh at the absurdity. "You can't just move in here," I finally said, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. Her eyes flicked up from her phone, calm and unbothered. Why not? You've got plenty of space. And you're always talking about how lonely you are in this big house. Now you won't have to be alone. The words hit me like a slap. She wasn't just twisting the situation. She was rewriting reality. Loneliness had been my choice, my peace, not something to be pitted or filled by someone barging in without permission. This isn't about space or loneliness, I snapped louder this time. This is my home. You didn't even ask. Her smile didn't fade. It only sharpened. Oh, don't be so dramatic. Or family. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? I felt my hands curl into fists. The hypocrisy was staggering. Just days ago, she told me I didn't even have a family, yet now she wanted to use the same word like a shield to justify her intrusion. My throat burned with unspoken rage. I wanted to throw her words back at her, to remind her of what she'd said, but something inside me held back. Maybe it was fear of escalating too quickly. Maybe it was disbelief that this was happening at all. The following days blurred together in a haze of tension. Every corner of my house screamed her presence. Her clothes piled in the laundry, her perfume lingering in the bathroom. Her voice carrying through the hallways as she called her friends to brag about her new place. She even had the audacity to introduce my home as hers when she brought someone over, laughing like a proud hostess. I felt like a ghost, watching my own life be hijacked in plain sight. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table trying to eat dinner, she joined me with a plate stacked high with food she hadn't cooked and announced her grand plan. I'm thinking of redecorating the living room. The color scheme is too dull. Maybe I'll add a new rug, some art, move the sofa to the other side. Don't you think it'll look better? I stared at her in disbelief. You're not redecorating anything. This is not your house. Her fork clattered against the plate, and her face hardened. Why are you being so selfish? Don't you get it? I'm trying to make this place feel like home, for both of us. You act like you're the only one who matters here. Selfish. That word echoed in my head all night. She had weaponized it, trying to flip the situation so I was the villain, the cold sibling unwilling to share. And worse, she began spreading that narrative to others. My phone started buzzing with calls from relatives, some I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly questioning me. Why won't you let your sister stay with you? She's going through a hard time, my aunt scolded. Family should help family. I wanted to scream that helping family and being exploited by family were two very different things. I wanted to tell them how she had insulted me, how she had manipulated her way into my house, how she hadn't asked but taken. But every time I tried to explain, they brushed me off. You're overreacting, they said. She's your sister. Don't make such a big deal out of it. It was as if I was invisible. My voice drowned out by her lies, my pain dismissed as pride. She was cunning, painting herself as the struggling victim and me as the heartless sibling hoarding comfort. Each phone call chipped away at me, and for the first time I started questioning my own sanity. Was I being unreasonable? Was I too harsh? Maybe I should just let her stay until she found her footing. But then I would walk into my living room, see her sprawled on my couch, bossing me around in my own home, and the truth came rushing back. This wasn't about temporary help. This was about her claiming something that wasn't hers. The breaking point came one evening when I overheard her on the phone. She was in the living room, laughing with a friend, completely unaware that I was standing just down the hall. Yeah, it's basically my house now, she bragged. She won't admit it yet, but she'll give in. She always does. I know how to push her buttons. My chest tightened, fury boiling up from somewhere deep inside. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just an argument between siblings. This was a battle for control, for respect, for my very sense of self. If I gave in now, I would lose more than just my house. I would lose my dignity, my independence, and the boundaries I had fought hard to build. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling just like I had after her first cruel words. But this time was different. I wasn't just hurt. I was determined. She thought I would always bend, always let her have her way. Maybe in the past that had been true. Maybe I had been too soft, too forgiving, too desperate to keep peace in a family that never truly gave me peace. But not anymore. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet. Whether I would confront her directly, change the locks, or simply pack her things and put them outside. But I knew one thing for certain. This situation had to end. And it had to end soon. The next morning when I walked into the kitchen and saw her there again, my coffee brewing, her phone buzzing with messages from people who thought she was the victim, I felt a new steadiness in my chest. She looked up at me with that same smug smile, ready to play her games, but I didn't flinch this time. Something inside me had shifted. And though she didn't realize it yet, the battle she thought she was winning was about to take a very different turn. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm with no umbrella. My sister's presence in the house wasn't just physical anymore. It had seeped into every corner of my life. What hurt most wasn't just her boxes stacked in my hallway or her shoes by the door. It was the way she spun the story to the outside world. Somehow, she managed to paint me as the villain while she slipped perfectly into the role of the helpless victim. Began with the phone calls. At first, they were occasional, an aunt here, a cousin there, each one echoing the same disapproving tone. "She's your sister," they would say. "She has nowhere else to go. Why are you making it so hard for her?" I tried to explain the truth, but their ears were already filled with her version. She had told them she was homeless, that I was cold-hearted, that I had more than enough but refused to share. By the second week, the calls multiplied, sometimes 3 or 4 in one day. And with each one my frustration grew. I remember one particular evening when my mother called. Her voice laced with disappointment. "I raised you better than this," she said. "You've always had a roof over your head, and your sister just needs some kindness right now. Why can't you show her compassion?" My throat tightened. I wanted to shout that I had shown compassion, that I had been showing it for years while she took and took without giving back. But when I tried to speak, my mother cut me off, her loyalty already swayed. "Stop being stubborn," she snapped. "She's family." Family. That word had become a weapon. My sister wielded it like a sword, slicing through every boundary I tried to set. And yet, when she was inside the house, she treated me like I was nothing. She barely acknowledged me, moving around as if she owned the place, making plans without asking, leaving messes behind for me to clean. It was as if she wanted to prove her point, that I was powerless in my own home. One night, I overheard her on the phone again. She was in the living room, laughing softly with one of our cousins. "Oh, she's making a big deal out of nothing," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "She's just dramatic, you know how she is. Honestly, I think she likes the attention. But don't worry, I'll sort it out. She'll come around. She always does." The words made my skin crawl. It wasn't just that she was lying. It was that she believed she knew me so well, believed she had already won because I had always bent in the past. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying her laughter. My chest burned with anger, but beneath the fury was something sharper. Shame. Shame that I had allowed her to make me feel small. Shame that I had let her convince others of her lies. Shame that I had remained silent for so long. The next day, I decided to confront her directly. I waited until she was in the kitchen, casually flipping through a magazine she had left on the counter. "We need to talk," I said firmly. She glanced up, feigning surprise. "About what?" "About you moving in here without permission. About you telling everyone lies about me. About how this has to stop." My voice shook at first, but I forced myself to hold her gaze. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then she smirked. "Oh, so now you've found your voice. That's cute." She tossed the magazine aside and leaned back in her chair. "You think anyone believes you? You think they'll take your side after everything I've told them? Please. I'm the one they care about, not you." The words struck like daggers, but I didn't look away. "This isn't about sides. This is about respect. And you've shown me none." Her laughter was sharp, bitter. "Respect. You think you deserve respect. You're pathetic. You sit in this house all alone, clinging to your little routines, acting like you've built some great life. But the truth is, you have nothing. No husband, no kids, no family. That's why you don't even deserve this house. At least I know how to live. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wanted to scream back, to tell her she was wrong, to throw her out right then and there. But my voice cracked, and all I could manage was, "Get out of my house." She stood, her expression hardening. "Or what? You'll call the police. You wouldn't dare. Do you really want everyone to know you kicked your own sister out on the street? Go ahead. Prove me right." I felt my strength falter. She was right about one thing. If I forced her out, the family would turn completely against me. They already saw me as selfish, cold. Kicking her out would only cement the story she had spun. My silence in that moment wasn't weakness. It was survival. But to her it looked like victory. She walked past me with a smug grin, her shoulder brushing mine deliberately hard. "That's what I thought," she whispered. The following week was unbearable. She grew bolder, louder, more entitled. She rearranged the living room furniture without asking. She invited friends over without warning, filling the house with laughter that excluded me. She even took my car keys one afternoon and drove off without permission, returning hours later with no explanation. When I confronted her, she rolled her eyes. "Relax," she said. "You're so uptight. You should be grateful I even included you in my life." Grateful. That word nearly broke me. She wanted me to be grateful for her intrusion, for her lies, for the way she twisted everything I loved about my life into something suffocating. But instead of breaking, something inside me hardened. The more she pushed, the more I realized that silence wasn't survival anymore. It was surrender. And I wasn't going to surrender. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote everything down. Every insult, every lie, every instance of manipulation. I needed proof, not just for myself, but for anyone who might one day listen. I wrote until my hand cramped, the words pouring out like poison being drained from a wound. When I finally put the pen down, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. As I crawled into bed, her laughter echoed faintly down the hall. No longer filled me with shame. Filled me with resolve. She thought she had me cornered, but she was wrong. This was my house, my life, my story. And I wasn't going to let her steal it from me. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew one thing for certain. The next move would be mine. The morning after I filled page after page with my sister's lies and insults, I woke up with a new fire burning in my chest. For weeks, I had been living under her shadow, letting her dictate the rhythm of my home, of my peace, even of my relationships with the rest of the family. I had felt trapped, powerless, as if my only choices were silence or surrender. But as I looked around my room that morning, I realized something simple and undeniable. This was my house. The walls, the roof, the very floor beneath my feet had been built by my hard work, my sacrifices, my sweat. And I refused to be a prisoner in it any longer. When I walked into the kitchen, I found her once again sitting at the table with her coffee, scrolling on her phone like the queen of the castle. She glanced up with a smirk. "You look tired. Didn't sleep well again." Her tone dripped with mock concern. I didn't answer. Instead, I went straight to the counter, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat opposite her. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for me to react, to play into her little game. But I didn't. I sat there in silence, sipping my coffee, letting her squirm under the weight of it. For the first time since she had moved in, I didn't let her words get under my skin. That small act of control, choosing silence instead of defensiveness, gave me strength. And it was only the beginning. Later that day I started making calls. Quiet ones, private ones. I spoke to a lawyer, explaining the situation carefully, every detail spilling out of me like water from a broken dam. The lawyer listened calmly and then told me something that made my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. "This is your property. If she doesn't have a lease, if she hasn't been invited officially, she has no legal right to stay. You don't have to live like this. Hearing those words was like being handed a weapon after weeks of being defenseless. I hung up with a plan forming in my mind. I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to fight her in front of others anymore. I was going to do this smartly, quietly, and firmly. But even with that reassurance, the battle inside the house continued. My sister seemed to sense my shift in energy. She started pushing harder, as if desperate to break me before I had the chance to act. One evening, I came home to find she had moved the furniture around in the living room again, this time shoving my bookshelf into a corner and hanging one of her paintings on the wall. "Doesn't it look better?" she said, grinning proudly. "It looks like you're trying to erase me," I muttered, unable to hold back. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. You act like this place is some museum. It's just a house. I'm making it a home." "A home for who?" shot back. Her smile faltered for just a moment, then she narrowed her eyes. "For us. But if you can't handle that, maybe you should leave." The audacity left me speechless. In my own house, she was suggesting that I leave. I felt the blood rush to my face, but instead of shouting, I turned and walked away. I locked myself in my room, my hands trembling, not from fear this time but from rage. That was the moment I knew. Her arrogance would be her undoing. The following days, I kept documenting everything. The names of people she brought over without asking, the food she wasted, the way she took my car without permission. I even recorded snippets of her conversations when she boasted to others about how she had me wrapped around her finger. Every detail was another piece of armor for me. But the hardest part was facing the family. The calls didn't stop. In fact, they grew harsher. My uncle rang one night, his voice booming through the phone. "I don't know what's wrong with you, but this is disgraceful. She's your blood. You have more than enough, and yet you're making her life difficult. Shame on you." I bit my tongue, wanting to scream the truth, but I knew it would be useless. She had already poisoned their minds. No amount of explanation would change it. Instead, I learned to say less. "You don't know the whole story," I replied quietly, and I ended the call before he could lecture me further. It hurt. God, it hurt, to feel like the whole family had turned their backs on me. But the hurt was also cleansing. It stripped away the illusion I had clung to for so long. That family was supposed to protect me. Maybe blood tied us together, but it didn't guarantee love, and it certainly didn't guarantee loyalty. One night, as I sat alone in the quiet of my bedroom, I remembered her words from the beginning. "You don't even have a family." At the time, they had broken me. Now I began to see them differently. Maybe she had been cruel, maybe she had meant to destroy me with those words, but in some twisted way, she had told the truth. I didn't have a family. Not in the traditional sense, not in the way people expect. What I had was myself, my independence, my hard-earned peace, and maybe that was enough. With that realization, my plan became clear. I would stop trying to win over the family. I would stop trying to explain, stop trying to defend myself against their blind accusations. Instead, I would stand my ground quietly, firmly, legally. I would let actions speak louder than words. The next morning when I walked into the kitchen, she was there again, coffee in hand, smile sharp as a knife. "You look different," she said, eyeing me carefully. "Finally accepted that I'm not going anywhere." I met her gaze evenly. "No. I've accepted that you've gone too far." Her smile faltered just for a split second. She recovered quickly, of course, tossing her hair and laughing. "We'll see about that." Yes, we would. And as I walked out the door that day, papers folded neatly in my bag, I knew the storm was reaching its peak. But for the first time since it began, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I was ready. The day the storm broke began like any other, quiet and deceptively normal. My sister sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone, while I moved silently around the room, pouring myself a cup. The tension between us had grown so thick it was almost tangible, hanging in the air like smoke. She smirked at me, the same smirk she had worn since the day she invaded my home, and said, "So, have you finally accepted that this is our house now?" Her voice was dripping with mockery, but this time I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't let her words pierce me like before. Instead, I simply met her gaze and said, "We'll see." She laughed, tossing her head back, certain she had won. She thought she had broken me, convinced herself that her lies to the family and her bullying inside the house had made me too weak to resist. But what she didn't know was that while she had been busy bragging about her victory, I had been preparing mine. Every insult, every manipulation, every bold act of entitlement had been documented. I had the lawyer's advice tucked firmly in my pocket, and more importantly, I had regained the strength she thought she had stolen from me. That afternoon I came home with papers in hand. My heart pounded as I walked up to my own door, knowing that once I stepped inside, everything would change. I found her lounging on the couch, feet propped up on the table, flipping through channels on the television like she owned the place. She barely looked up. "Where've you been?" "I was thinking of hosting some friends tomorrow night. You should pick up snacks on your way back from work." Her arrogance was almost laughable. I set the papers on the table in front of her and said calmly, "Read these." She frowned, picking them up. As her eyes moved across the page, I saw the shift in her face, the widening eyes, the tightening jaw, the color draining from her cheeks. "What is this?" she demanded. "It's an eviction notice," I replied evenly. "You have no legal right to be here. This house is mine, and you are leaving." For a moment she was speechless, and in that silence, I felt years of her power over me crumble. But she recovered quickly, slamming the papers onto the table. "You wouldn't dare. You can't do this to me. What will the family say when they find out you threw your own sister onto the street?" "They can say whatever they want," I said, my voice firm. "Because I'm done explaining myself. I'm done defending myself to people who only hear your lies. This is my house, my life, and you will not take it from me." Her face twisted with rage. She stood, her voice rising to a scream. "You think you're better than me? You think anyone cares about you? You're nothing. You'll die alone in this house, and no one will even notice." The words would have shattered me once, but not anymore. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Better alone than surrounded by poison." For a long moment we stared at each other, the silence vibrating with all the years of unspoken bitterness between us. Then she grabbed her bag, swept her keys from the table, and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this," she spat, slamming it behind her. The house shook with the impact, but when the echoes faded, an unexpected calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. I walked through the room slowly, taking in the silence, the stillness. Her boxes were still here, her clothes still stuffed into corners, her scent still lingering in the air, but she was gone. And that was enough. The days that followed weren't easy. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages, relatives furious at me for what I had done. "Heartless," they called me. "Cruel. Cold. How could you abandon your sister like that?" I didn't bother trying to explain anymore. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I said the only truth that mattered. "You don't know the whole story." And then I hung up. Hurt, of course. The idea of family I had carried my whole life had been shattered, replaced with something harsher but clearer. Blood might connect us, but it didn't make us loyal. It didn't make us kind. And sometimes the people who should protect us are the very ones we need protection from. It was a hard lesson, but one I knew I needed to learn. A week later I packed up her things. Each box I taped shut felt like sealing a wound. I placed them by the door and called her once, leaving a brief message. "Your things are here. Pick them up by Friday." Nothing more, nothing less. When she came, she didn't look at me, didn't say a word. She hauled her boxes into her car, slammed the trunk, and drove off without even glancing back. And just like that, the chapter closed. That night I sat on the couch, the same couch she had claimed as hers, and looked around my living room. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a symbol of what I had fought for, what I had reclaimed. My peace, my independence, my self-respect. She had tried to take it all, but she hadn't succeeded. And as much as the battle had scarred me, It had also changed me. I was stronger now, clearer about who I was and what I would no longer accept. Sometimes I still hear her words in my head. You don't even have a family. They don't sting the way they used to. Instead, they remind me of the truth I had to face. Maybe I don't have the family I once imagined, one built on unconditional love and support. But I have myself. I have the home I built with my own hands. I have the strength to set boundaries, to stand up when someone tries to cross them. And that, I realized, was more valuable than any false version of family could ever be. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, a soft peace wrapped around me like a blanket. The house was quiet, truly quiet, for the first time in weeks. I paused at the doorway of my room, listening to the silence, savoring it. This was mine. My life, my space, my story. No one could take that from me again. And though the scars of her betrayal would always remain, they no longer felt like open wounds. They felt like reminders that I had faced cruelty and manipulation, and I had survived. More than that, I had stood tall, claimed my place, and walked through the storm into calm. The chapter of her invasion was over, and as I lay down to sleep, I knew one thing for certain. Sometimes family doesn't mean who you're born to. Sometimes family is simply yourself, standing strong in your own truth. And that was enough. Sparkles, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Sparkles, subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more powerful stories that will keep you hooked.